Bushwhacks were some of the worst days I've ever had in the mountains, or life, really.
Whereas Panther Mountain is totally opposite. It's a mountain on top of a crater.
I think the weather challenges on this incident were particularly difficult.
It was really the development of New York State. Catskills were responsible.
Now you're listening to Inside the Line, the Catskill Mountains podcast.
Going totally off topic now. How did this get you into Hudson Valley weather? With you starting as a senior president and senior forecaster of Hudson Valley weather.
So weather is the weather story starts a lot sooner than the hiking story. So for weather, I was probably about 6 years old, and I saw a tree get struck by lightning while I was looking out the window. And again, it just triggered me. I was like, what was that? I need to know everything I can possibly know about what I just saw. And from that point on, my mom often told the story that I stopped watching cartoons and I would sit in front of the Weather Channel all day. This was back when the Weather Channel was cool.
Yeah, right.
You had there wasn't like Ice Road Truckers on. It was like Jim Cantori, Dave Schwartz, Bob Hope, the hurricane specialist, Weather on the Eights with soft jazz playing. It was like the golden years of the Weather Channel, right? So
we sound like boomers, Alex. Come on, stop.
Yeah, Alex, this is stuff you don't have to admit. You went from the peak of coolness, finding the ADK plaque in the Catskills, now to Weather on the Eights.
Weather on the Eights.
All right. Jeez.
Jesus.
It just fascinated me, and I started reading weather books. Every Christmas, weather books. Next Christmas, a weather station for the roof. And I fully immersed myself in it as soon as weather forecast models were accessible to the public. I started reviewing weather models on my own. So I would pull up the same exact forecast models that all weather forecasters at the National Weather Service use, right? So, and I started to teach myself how to use them. In early days, I'm doing this from like a cell phone, logging into the pro account for AccuWeather, accessing the models, and trying to formulate my own forecasts based on what I was seeing on the forecast models. Then cue Facebook, right? So in school and as a child, I used to write forecasts down on pieces of paper and like hand them to people, like, here's what the weather is going to be. Then social media came out, and I started posting snowfall forecasts on Facebook. And I would post something, and people who are friends with me on Facebook would be like, Alex, like, nobody else is saying this. And I'd be like, all right, well, I'm not making you listen. And then it would happen, and they'd come back and they'd say, how did you know that was going to happen, but the Weather Channel did? I'm like, listen, I understand this region. I understand the area. I did that for about a year on my own personal page for like whatever 130 people I had on. And then one day I got fully frustrated with the fact that if you wanted weather for the Catskills or the Hudson Valley, you had to take the Albany forecast and you had to deduct the New York City forecast. And you'd have to say, well, I guess it's going to be somewhere between those two. Because the National Weather Service and the Weather Channel like to pretend that this entire area almost didn't exist. It was like, even the Weather Channel, Albany, New York City, Albany, New York City. And you're like, yo, not us. It's like, there's a whole diverse area here of 4,000 foot mountains and river valleys and upslopes and downslopes. And you're just going to group us in with New York City or Albany. Like, we have to do better.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat there one day and I was like, we need Hudson Valley weather. And I started a Facebook page, called it Hudson Valley Weather. And for the first several weeks and months, it was like my mom telling me every forecast was great and a couple people who I had no idea who they were. who liked the page. And I was like, all right, cool. Cue Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Irene. So Hurricane Irene, I forecasted about 4 days in advance. And I told everyone along the Esopus Creek and downstream of the major reservoirs that they should move to high ground even before there was a flood warning posted. And I stayed up posting on the Facebook page for 3 days straight. And when everyone in the Catskills started to lose power, I told them to charge their phones and that I would continue to post for them so they knew it was happening. And all of a sudden, I had 13,000 fans, and people were crediting me with saving their lives and saying that the only reason they knew to leave to higher ground was because of my Facebook posts and that they lost their entire house.
Wow.
And, I continued to grow it from there. I called the October snowstorm that we had around that same time, 2010, 2009. And then I forecasted Sandy at 6 days before it hit. And the Sandy call at 6 days out led to an article in Forbes magazine about Hudson Valley weather. And 10,000 fans turned into 30,000 fans, which eventually turned into 70,000 fans, which then turned into me getting a call from Chris at Clear Channel Radio and asking me if I would do the weather for all 7 of the Clear Channel radio stations in the Hudson Valley. WBPM, all of the most popular stations. And I was like, sure. And now to this day, all 7 of those stations say at the bottom and top of every hour, this forecast is powered by HudsonValleyWeather.com.
Wow.
And so now I've got, at this point, 100,000 fans, 7 radio stations, a Forbes article. And, I start getting messages from, I'll never forget the one day I got a message from somebody and it said, hey, just so you know, your page is what's up at Stewart Air Force Base during bad weather.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow. Right. And it was kind of at that moment after I started getting messages from highway superintendents and school superintendents and government agencies and local police departments asking me what was going to happen, that I realized that my hobby and my passion was no longer something that I could do in my spare time for fun, that it had become a job. And if I didn't post, people were wondering where I was, and that people were literally sitting in front of their computers, just hitting the refresh button, waiting for the next forecast to be posted. And then it became a lot greater of a responsibility because I realized that my hobby and my passion had turned into something that hundreds of thousands of people were coming to count on. Fast forward, nearly 200,000 followers on Facebook. The Facebook page and Stash, I know you run social media content, so you could appreciate, 4 to 7 million views in 30 days on a Facebook page is an extreme amount of volume. And we average about 3 million, but in the winter, especially winters like the one we're having, getting up into the 7, 8, and sometimes 10 million views in a 30-day period is not uncommon.
Wow.
And, to your point, people are extremely critical. And I obsess over always getting it right, which is a very, very difficult position to put yourself in when you're dealing with an inexact science. And I like it to be that way because the same thing that drove me to become overly passionate about the weather is the same thing that became my passion for climbing mountains. I am fueled by things that are uncontrollable. I love the idea that in a planet filled with technology that's expanding by the day, that there are still science-based and geological-based things on this planet that we have zero control over. We have supercomputers the size of rooms to put out fancy forecast models. They often get it wrong, and nature does whatever the hell it wants to do.
True.
The fact that something that powerful, that impactful on our planet, that we still don't have a handle on it, intrigues me. Like I love dealing with things that are unsurmountable. Which is the same feeling you get when you're standing on top of a 3,900 foot mountain in 60-mile-an-hour winds. It's just that raw feeling of being made to feel small in the grand scheme of things is the same thing that drew me to the science of meteorology. When I started reading weather books as a kid and reading about, tornadoes that are capable of piercing wood with blades of grass, or peeling pavement from the street, or hurricanes sucking toilet water out the roof vent of your house, and rising the ocean surface by 20 feet with waves on top of it in a storm surge. It's kind of hard not to be fascinated by the fact that something that extreme is around us every single day, and we're just here just trying to take our best stab at it.
Yeah.
So Alex, kind of picking up on that, what I haven't heard is, did you go to college to study weather forecasting, meteorology, anything of the sort? Or are you just entirely self-taught?
So my favorite part of this story is, remember, all of this kind of traces back. So you think about the hiking thing, you think about my early days of hiking, you heard what I said about my late teens, and now you hear this story about the weather. There's one place that is not great for a high-strung ADD kid who is chasing dopamine and thrills, because that's just how I'm wired. And that place is school, right? So given all of this, I actually dropped out of high school in 10th grade and got my GED. I took some online meteorology classes at Penn State University, only to challenge myself. And this was, Hudson Valley weather was already a thing at this point. Hudson Valley weather was north of 130,000 fans. And I was like, you know what? Penn State, the most premier school in the country for meteorology, offers online classes. I've never even done a lick of a college course. The last time I was in school, I was a 10th grader. And I signed up for it and completely blasted through it.
Wow. That's great.
There's more, like if you take another 12 credits, you can get something called the online forecasting certificate, which is cool. It'd be a good wall hanger. But soon after finishing those classes, I was kind of like, you know what? I don't need to check that box, because to nearly 200,000 people, I am a meteorologist. And I could spend a couple $100,000 taking all different levels of calculus and thermodynamics and say that I have a degree. But meanwhile, there were a few years ago where Jim Cantori only had a few thousand followers more than I did. Right.
Wow.
So what am I really, so what was I chasing after? Right. Am I chasing after a piece of paper on the wall, or should I be satisfied for the fact that at 6 years old, I became obsessed with the weather? And despite dropping out of high school, I still got to become a weatherman.
Yeah.
And I like that story more than I stuck to all the rules and went through the establishment and got the paper degree on the wall, and I stand in front of a green screen all day. I get to say whatever I want. I get to take hard approaches on forecasts. I get to be risky because, you know what? I don't have sponsors. I don't have red tape that the government sites have. The National Weather Service, it's www.weather.gov.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
They have thresholds of when they can issue a winter storm warning. They have thresholds of what they consider a hurricane. They can't take risky forecast approaches because it wouldn't be good for business. On the flip side, AccuWeather and the Weather Channel, they turn a cold front into the polar vortex and convince everyone that their cattle are going to freeze. And they're doing it for clicks. They're doing it for revenue. They know that sensationalism drives dollars.
Yeah.
I'm not held to any of that. And guess what? If I went the degree route, I could have landed a job in one of those places and never been able to forecast Sandy at 6 days out. You know why? Because forecasting a storm of that magnitude at 6 days out would be risky anywhere else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You'd have to break the rules.
I'm my own entity. I don't need to follow those rules. I get to just live out that 6-year-old dream, be passionate about it, obsess over the details, try to be right as often as I possibly can. And to a few 100,000 people who have often told me they've deleted all their weather apps or don't watch the Weather Channel anymore, they don't care that there isn't a degree on my wall. All they care is that if I say something's going to happen, it happens somewhere near what I said was going to happen, and they trust me. And, I decided a long time ago that I like telling that story more than me sitting here tonight and being like, oh, yeah, I went to Penn State. I got a degree in meteorology. And, I stand in front of a green screen and I tell the public everything that I'm scripted to tell them and that I'm allowed to tell them.
Mhm.
Versus I lived out my childhood dream through passion, commitment, and being the first person smart enough to put a weather page on social media.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great story. And somehow, as hard as it's going to be, we've got to segue from that epic story to what is a microclimate.
Yeah. Now the topic.
Now we go into the classroom. Now Alex is going to take us into the classroom, and he's getting out the whiteboard and saying, "Here, guys, this is a microclimate."
We teed this up perfectly. We really did, because telling the story of how I got here is the foundational story of microclimates. Because about 3 years into Hudson Valley weather, I created something called the zone map. And I broke the Hudson Valley up into distinct zones: zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. I built that entire map with the Paint application on my computer and a screenshot of a Google map.
Nice.
The entire region got so obsessed with it that people were literally just shouting out, like, hey, it's Lisa from zone 3. Hey, it's Bill up in zone 4. Everyone knew their zone. They knew that if I was forecasting a certain storm for a certain area, that they knew where they lived. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, how does that have to do with anything we're talking about?
Yeah.
The zone map was built off of microclimates. The microclimates in the Hudson Valley are very much determined on topography. And I built the zone map using topographic maps that I used to climb the Catskills.
Nice.
So now you see how this all right. So I always loved the weather. Social media didn't exist yet, so I only did it for my internal circle. Then I got into hiking. I stood on the eastern escarpment looking down at the valley. I hiked through climates to get to the summits. I recognized the difference between how the valleys that enter the Hudson Valley versus the cloves that come off of the inner valleys have different weather impacts. I started to understand the upslope precipitation on the western side of the Catskills and how that led to decreased precipitation further east. I learned that on the eastern escarpment, it's a great place to be if you want deep snow, but I really had to understand why it was a great place to be for deep snow. And when you've stood on them, when you've walked through it, when you've poured over topographic maps to the point where I eventually ordered a topographic shaded relief map for each peak in the Catskills, custom, from my topo.
Wow.
And just poured over every single summit in the Catskills. And I started to use what I learned in the Catskills hiking the 3500s with what the weather models were showing, and then what the outcome of the storms ended up being, because they were never all the same. The models would say one thing, and then something else would happen. And I wasn't the type of person who was just like, well, you know what? The models got it wrong. I was the type of person who needed to understand why the models got it wrong. And I very soon started to learn that topography was a major driver of missed forecasts in our region. that upslopes, downslopes, orographic lifts, and the difference in elevation and temperature gradients made a very large difference to the forecast. But the problem was there were no other forecasts taking any of those things into consideration. So I created the zone map, and the zone map was based off of microclimates. And
Wow.
I determined that the Western Catskills was one microclimate, and that the Eastern Catskills was a second microclimate, and that the Upper Hudson Valley was a microclimate, and that the Mid Hudson Valley was a microclimate, and that the Hudson Highlands from Storm King to Bear Mountain was its own microclimate, and that the Taconics and the Berkshires in Eastern Columbia and Eastern Dutchess County were their own microclimate.
Wow.
And I started forecasting based on those individual zones instead of just saying, hey, Hudson Valley, you can expect 3 to 6 inches of snow. I started to say zone 1 should expect 3 to 6 inches of snow, but zone 2, because of orographic lift and upslope conditions, should expect 4 to 8 inches. But in the upper and mid Hudson Valley, expect slightly less because of moderate temperatures. But the lower Hudson Valley will see all rain, especially south of 84, because you're below the Hudson Highlands. You won't get the lift. You won't get the elevation. You won't get the colder temperatures. And then the magic started to unfold, where people started to realize that the problem with forecasting in the Hudson Valley is you don't need a paintbrush. You need something a lot more detailed. You need a finely sharpened pencil if you want to forecast correctly for this region. And nobody else is doing that. And there's still nobody doing that.
Yeah, right.
Like I said earlier in the program, there's no money to be made in making sure that people in the Eastern Catskills and Western Catskills understand that they might have different weather. Nobody cares, right? Corporate weather doesn't care about whether or not the Eastern Escarpment sees more snow than the Western Catskills. They've gotten better, and you'll find, and I laugh a lot, the National Weather Service in both Albany and Binghamton very early on was following Hudson Valley weather, to the point where we were once contacted by the National Weather Service in Binghamton, and basically said, what you're doing is amazing. We appreciate it. When you share our content, because I have no choice but to share their content sometimes, because I am not in the position to issue winter weather advisories. It's a government thing, right? So I share them because it's good public knowledge. I would share their content, and then their social media manager would be like, holy crap, what happened to our, why do we have so many views all of a sudden? And they would trace it back to my following was so large that when I shared their content, their social media numbers would skyrocket, right? So they started to see the correlation. And what you've probably noticed is the National Weather Service in Albany and Binghamton and weather as a whole has really tried to adopt what Hudson Valley Weather has been doing the entire time. I'll give you a perfect example, and I'll test your guys' memory. Do you remember the National Weather Service ever, before a few years ago, separating Western and Eastern Ulster County during winter weather events?
Absolutely not. I don't even think they separate cities. They're like Binghamton, Albany, Syracuse, and then New York City.
They do now. Western Greene County and Western Ulster County can have different advisories than Eastern Greene and Eastern Ulster. That never existed before.
Oh, shit.
Only about 7 years ago, if the National Weather Service was going to enter a winter storm warning, they'd issue it for all of Ulster County.
Interesting.
And that would leave people in Kingston thinking, what the hell happened? We had a winter storm warning.
Well, Alex, stop. I thought you told us that Kingston's not in Ulster County. No. So going back to the classroom with Professor Alex, you've mentioned 2 times now orographic lifts. And so why don't you, if I said that correctly, correct me if I got it wrong.
Orographic.
What is a orographic lift and what is a microclimate? Before we continue on with the discussion.
So let's talk about the Eastern Escarpment. because it's one of the finest examples of it. Specifically, Slide Mountain is a great example of it. When you think about our weather, a lot of our precipitation, especially in the winter, it comes from low pressure areas that pass either directly over us or to our south or up the coast, Pennsylvania to New England, all the way up the East Coast in the form of a nor'easter, tropical depressions passing to our east and west. So you ask yourself, why did Hunter Mountain receive 17 to 20 inches of rain in Hurricane Irene? Why did surrounding areas get 7 inches, but Hunter and those areas received over 16 inches? And the answer is orographic lift. So the best way of describing it is the warmer a parcel of air is, the more ability it has to hold moisture. So warm air, a parcel of warm air can hold more water within it. It's just the way it works, right? As air cools, it loses its ability to hold moisture. Hence why cold air is typically dry and warm air is typically moist. It's how the molecules react within a parcel of air. So you take warm air and you begin to lift it and you get thunderstorms. So I'll give you a perfect example. What is a cumulonimbus cloud? It's the visual effect of a rising parcel of air. That's why it looks like exploding cauliflower. All you are seeing is a parcel of air that was superheated on the surface, rising, and as it does, it condenses into clouds, and eventually it hits the very, very top of the atmosphere where it can't expand anymore, and it forms an anvil head.
It's an anvil cloud. I know that. That's like the storm clouds, right?
The anvil head of a cumulonimbus cloud is you simply seeing the point in the atmosphere that the parcel of air can no longer rise. It's reached the troposphere. It's capped. That's the maximum height it can reach. That's a thunderstorm. And as that parcel rises, the higher it gets, the taller the cloud deck gets, the more precipitation it can hold, and you get a thunderstorm. And if you're in the Midwest or you're in parts of the Hudson Valley, that is how you get a supercell. Because all a supercell is a cumulonimbus cloud with shear. So you take a big 26,000 foot cumulus cloud and run wind across it. And what eventually happens to that giant parcel of air? It begins to rotate. So with proper shear, a cumulonimbus cloud rotates, and at the bottom of that rotating supercell, you open the drain, you get a funnel. There's your tornado.
Wow.
Now you understand how parcels of air become weather. So now that is how just the atmosphere works. That happens in an open field in Nebraska. The sun beats down. It's why thunderstorms form during the afternoon during maximum heating. So the sun is at the highest point of the day. The ground is as hot as it's going to get. Air is rising. The birds are riding the thermals. Prime thunderstorm conditions. And that happens on its own, on flat terrain. Now take a parcel of air and drive it over a 4,000 foot mountain. You have what's called orographic lift. The mountains are acting as the lift instead of thermodynamics. So it's no longer the heating surface rising the air. It's the air being forced up and over terrain. And as you force air up, it has to lose its moisture, which is why Slide Mountain and the Eastern Escarpment have the most precipitation in the Catskills, because air is always forcibly being pushed up and over the escarpment, and on its way up, it has to release all of its moisture, leading to enhanced snowfall, enhanced rainfall, enhanced precipitation rates, and even rain or snow on days where it's not forecasted.
Are you sure you're not a fucking professor of some college? Jesus, this is like I can get more detail out of you than I can get out of anything I've ever seen online. This is insane. This is awesome.
Right. So, but it makes sense, right?
It does.
And that's why I had to give you the point on how it works in an open field, right?
Mm-hmm.
The atmosphere can do this with no help. It does it on its own through regular effects of just thermodynamics, heating the surface, the air rises, you get a thunderstorm, precipitation, boom. Cold fronts, same thing. Cold fronts create lift, right? Because cold fronts bring cold air in behind them. Cold air is heavy and dense. Warm air is light. When you force cold air under warm air, guess what you're doing? You're creating lift. Hence why cold fronts create bad weather, right? Because you are creating lift. Anytime you create lift, you're going to get precipitation. In areas where valleys meet mountains and oceans meet mountains, those mountains are going to create lift. If you want an extreme version of that, what is downwind of Mount Everest?
I don't have a clue.
Kalahari Desert. Mount Everest forces so much moisture out of the atmosphere that on the opposite side of Mount Everest, there is a desert.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't rain. There's none left.
No shit.
That's why when my daughter and I were on our trip this fall, you go from the Sierra Nevada mountains and head east over the next 4 mountain ranges. It gets drier and drier. There's less vegetation as you go from the Sierra Nevadas over the Inyos, over the Last Chance, the Panamints, and then you hit Death Valley, where there is no effing moisture. So, yeah, you can see that even right here in the Western United States.
Right. And it's amazing. It is amazing to think about because the amount of moisture that comes in off the Pacific is extraordinary. It should explain that's why you see some of these snowfall amounts out of the Sierra Nevada during good winters out there. And they're like, 12 to 15 feet of snow is expected. You know,
in 3 days.
You're forcing all of this Pacific moisture into these ginormous Sierra Nevada mountains, and it just wrings out every last drop of moisture available in the atmosphere onto these summits. Mm-hmm. And when it's done, there's nothing left for the deserts on the east side, right? So it's correct. That's the extreme versions of this. But we have that same effect here, upwind of the Berkshires, upwind of the Taconics. We have rain shadows. Kingston and the Hudson Valley are often impacted by downslope. I mean, you've seen it multiple times in the winter where we're forecasted to get a great storm, and for whatever reason, it rains all day in Kingston, but just to the west and the Catskills, they get tons of snow.
Yeah.
That's because guess what happens to air when it's sinking? We already know what happens to air when it's rising, but what happens when it's sinking?
Absorbs more moisture.
It warms and it dries.
Yeah.
So while the Catskills are getting hammered, as that air drops suddenly off the escarpment, the atmosphere warms and the air dries. And you'll get these storms sometimes in the winter where you're looking at the radar and you're like, it should be snowing and nothing's happening in Kingston. Yeah. Nothing's happening in Saugerties. The whole radar is lit up. Nothing's happening. You're watching the atmosphere dry the moisture. The radar beams are still seeing it because radar is at about 3,000 feet. But before that precipitation can reach the ground, it's evaporating because the wind coming off the Catskills is drying the atmosphere on the way down. So you think of microclimates, you think of the fact that it can be raining in Catskill and Saugerties, and you can take a 10-minute ride up a Platte Clove Road and get into a foot of snow. That's a microclimate, right?
Yeah, that's insane.
And those exist all across our region in different shapes, forms, or fashions. But
Alex,
that's the long, indirect, nerdy answer to what is a microclimate.
It's a fantastic answer. Jesus, it's just detailed as fuck, as I love to say it. So where, with you being, once again, you climb the mountains, you surveyed the mountains with your kind of like your meteorology sense, and where can you say that the most unpredictable weather can be on the mountain? We talked about Graham and Balsam Lake, I know the winds and the weather has been crazy up there whenever I've been up there, but where can you say that the most unpredictable weather can be?
It's definitely an exposure thing. Graham and balsam are great examples of it. You know, don't leave out. I've seen some great randomness. Wyndham High Peak, Halcut,
Oh, interesting.
um, Bear Pen,
Bear pen, definitely. Oh yeah.
and the Blackhead Range can be pretty good too. Again, what I've found from an extreme standpoint is when you think of the Catskills, the Eastern Escarpment is always great. Why? Because there's nothing south and east of it, right? So it is unprotected from other topography, but it's only great if that's the source direction of your weather. So if you want extreme weather in the Eastern Escarpment, go there when the storm is coming from the southwest or up the coast. Great place to be for a nor'easter, great place to be for a tropical storm. There's a reason they call it a hurricane ledge. Now, the weather's coming out of the northwest in the form of a powerful cold front, or we are post cold front and we're getting into those typical 40 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts ripping across New York State. And you start getting into Halkett and you start getting into the western Blackhead Range, Wyndham High Peak, Bear Pen, Graham. There's nothing to the west. So again, it goes back to an exposure piece. It's very similar to when you think about why does Mount Washington have the most extreme weather from a topography standpoint. To the west of Mount Washington, it's basically just a bowling alley from a topography standpoint that just directs everything at it. Right. So often when you're looking for extreme weather at altitude, you have to first look to, is it sheltered upstream and downstream from the source of your weather? So really the harshest, most unpredictable weather in the Catskills often comes on the peripheral zones and not necessarily the central Catskills.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you can see it a lot, with once again, with watching Hudson Valley weather, you'll show that maybe like Hunter and stuff will receive this, but then, everybody's like, well, why is Peekamoose an area receiving like 3 or 4 inches more? Once again, because there's no blockage of maybe that the winds coming from the south hitting Peekamoose, but then Peekamoose blocks everything, going up north, and like, it's just diverting all that kind of directional pattern.
The other interesting thing about the Southern Catskills that a lot of people don't realize is if you look at a topography map of the Catskills, and let's imagine that the Hudson Valley itself is always a source of warm air. When storms turn from snow to sleet to ice to eventually rain, it's because warm air is working its way up the valley. What starts to get unique about the Southern Catskills is the Route 28 corridor is like a drain plug thermally. When warm air floods up the valley, it often floods into the Ashokan Basin, and then it starts to flood up the Route 28 corridor. So what you'll find is mixing and rain snow line will often get all the way up to the Phoenicia Diner, and it's not until you get past that point where it stays snow. Right? It's a very definitive zone where you would think, oh, I'm heading west into the Catskills. It should be snowier. And like, as you're driving up Route 28, you're like, man, it's still raining. Well, there's nothing holding back that warm air. It's an open dam, right? Once it gets past the Ashokan, it floods into that whole valley. And unless you're in the high peaks, Ashokan High Peak, or some of the higher peaks to the east and west, sure. But as you're driving up that valley, it's not much different than being in Kingston. Because there's nothing to hold that air back, right? It's very interesting when you see the way topography behaves. You'll probably remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago now. Do you all remember the random crippling ice storm that only occurred in North Ulster County into Saugerties, where everything was coated in like 2.5 inches of freezing rain and the power was out for like 5 days?
I only remember that up like Bear Pen and stuff like that. Like, I don't remember that in Socrates. It was crazy. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was a recent severe ice storm that we had to do a study on for one of the utility companies, and we had to send them a report as to why it was such a localized event. And what we ended up finding out was basically the storm track flooded a whole bunch of warm air into the Hudson Valley, but there was a cold front sitting right along just north of Kingston, just north of it. And as the warm air came up the valley, it eroded all the cold air. Newburgh, gone. Accord, gone. And when you started to get to Hurley, the cold air just never left. And the warm air rode on top of it, and it fell as freezing rain for several hours, and nobody could figure out why. From Hurley to West Saugerties was this epic ice storm that didn't occur anywhere else. And what we found was extremely interesting. What we found was it rained in the Catskills because, again, when the atmosphere warms, it warms from the top down. I know that may sound weird, but remember, you open the freezer door, where do you feel the cold air? At your feet.
Yeah.
Right? Cold air is heavy, it's dense, it settles at the surface. So there can be periods during an inversion, and you've hiked in inversions where the cloud deck is below the summits. It can actually warm up in the summits and be cold in the valleys because the cold air gets stuck in the valleys and it can't be scoured out by the warm air above it because it settles into the little nooks and crannies in the cloves. And all freezing rain is liquid rain that's freezing on contact because the surfaces themselves are less than 32 degrees. So what we found in that particular event is that cold air was seeping down some of the cloves and valleys in West Saugerties and pouring out into the lowlands of Hurley, out to Wawarsing and to Accord, where you have the Hurley Flats. And the cold air was leaking into these areas and it got stuck and settled there. And it resulted in a catastrophic ice storm that only existed from about Wawarsing to some parts of West Saugerties, certain parts of Kingston, and all of Hurley. Inch and a half of freezing rain, and it rained everywhere else.
Wow.
Again, it goes back to how intricate trying to forecast can be when you're dealing with little tiny microclimates and how weather behaves when it's confronted by such diverse topography. So it's very fascinating to watch, and it's easy to get on a tangent with this stuff because once you both understand it, you start to look at it differently. And the forecasts will start to make a little bit more sense when you understand some of the intricacies behind it all.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
It's fascinating just to hear, once again, like just certain areas receive this much precipitation. This is cold. This is warm, how it affects this area, coming off of the escarpment. And, it's just, a lot of people will kind of relate when they're hiking. They listen to the podcast today or now. They're hiking and they're just like, oh shit! No wonder why. When I was going up Slide Mountain at this sort of level, I started I always remember. There's a one bend you hit when Slide Mountain where you start feeling more wind. You start feeling more precipitation and stuff. It's just a bend that brings you into the valley, that brings you into that scope of slide where all the weather goes up. And that's where I feel the wind. That's where I start feeling more alive because it's just like you and me, Alex. We got to go out together on one of these times where it's just like, oh shit, there's going to be some.
You just start looking at it differently. I feel like once you understand science of weather and climate, and then you start to understand the history of the Catskills, and then you start to geek out over topographic maps, and then when you hike and you stand on some of these summits and you hike these mountains, I feel like once you know the background, I feel like sometimes I'm hiking in 4K and everyone else is hiking in analog, right? Because I see things differently. Like if I'm on the fire tower of Balsam Lake Mountain, I know why the hoarfrost is building on the west side of the fire tower, not the east, right? It just, you start to see things differently. You're like, okay, well, the hoarfrost is so much thicker on the windward side of this fire tower, because at Balsam Lake Mountain, the primary wind direction is out of the west northwest. So it makes sense that the hoarfrost on the chain link fence heading up to the fire tower would be so much thicker on that side, right? So it's like, well, once you've looked at it from all dimensions and all different angles, the things you're seeing, from the tree species to where the balsams are more concentrated, to why they're stunted on one side of the mountain versus the other, to why some of them all grow with the same curvature to them, and everything you're seeing, it's like you're kind of seeing it in the matrix, because you're understanding why the environment is reacting to the environment that it exists within, if that makes sense.
No, definitely does. Yeah. It's I see that all the time. I mean, I'm not like you, with the meteorology and stuff like that, and I've studied this all the, but once again, you can see when you're hiking up, you can see where the flow of the wind direction is by the curvature in the trees or something, or you can see where the frost has hit, where the cold weather has hit, the precipitation has hit on Thomas Cole Mountain, but it didn't hit Black Dome or Blackhead because Thomas Cole blocked that and stuff. It's
Amazing.
It's not amazing. It's fucking magical. It's magical. Ted, you're up.
Okay. So I just kind of intellectually, I'm a few minutes behind here. So let me just take a break and catch up and ask Alex, if you weren't as knowledgeable and as experienced in forecasting the weather, and you were more like our average or typical listener, where is it would you go, whether it's Hudson Valley weather or elsewhere, to get a heads up on what I can expect Saturday or Sunday hiking in the Catskills, given the nuances that you're pointing out with the variety of microclimates and how dependent they are on the cold fronts moving in, the prevailing winds, etc. Where do we go to find this out in advance and be prepared in terms of what to expect when we go someplace, and where to avoid, because we're going to run into whether it's ice or just super deep snow?
So whenever there's extreme weather coming, especially winter weather, being that I have, Catskill hiker in my DNA, I often, you'll notice in my forecasts, I often go out of my way, and I mention the high peaks very often, especially during extreme weather events. I typically, even in some posts, I'll go out of my way to say, hey, for the hikers out there traveling above 3,000 feet, be on the lookout for this, this, and this. Because hikers and getting up into the Catskills is near and dear to my heart. Now, do I mention that in every forecast? No, it's a little bit redundant. I have to be somewhat aware of the fact that out of nearly 200,000 followers, maybe less than 10% are represented in those areas, and even less than that are people hiking above 2,500 feet, right? So you're catering the forecast for 5% of your listeners, and sometimes from my end, you don't know if it's appreciated, right? All the times, and every once in a while, I'll throw out 3,500 feet and this and that, and you could tell there's people in the comments who are like, I'm a 3,500 hiker. Thanks. I appreciate the information. But for the most part, it's a thankless job trying to shout out forecasts above livable zones in the Catskills. Now, with that said, my thought process when it comes to forecasting in the Catskills and how we can do a better job getting information out. I recently built a technology where I depend on everybody else to be the forecasters. I created something called Hivestorm, and I got the name Hivestorm from the idea that bees in a hive, they're all communicators. They all go out and communicate back to the main hive, and then you think about hive mind and how crowdsourcing information and how all of those things play together. And what I did is I created an application where if location services is on your phone, wherever you're standing, you can post an observation and it instantly displays as a pinpoint on a map. Power pole down, 6 inches of snow, 40-mile-an-hour gust. You can even attach a picture to your observation. And then these pin drops show up on a map, and any of them are clickable. This is all foundational to the fact that long term, my thought process would be, if we can get real ground information. So let's say you two are hiking tomorrow. And while you're hiking, you post an observation on Hivestorm that uploads later when you get back into service, but it remembers where you were when you pressed it. So the pin drop shows up at the summit of Panther Mountain. And you put 6 to 8 inches of snow, hard packed, blah, 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 blah. Future state is, with the addition of AI will now be able to take every ground observation that's given to this software and turn it into a visible, digestible map. So it could take every pin drop that comes out of the Catskills, every pin drop, and it could literally, in a second, create an average snow depth map for every peak above 2,500 feet based on ground truth information.
Is this going to put you out of business, though?
No, because there's a difference between nowcasting and forecasting.
Okay.
Right? Gathering the information from the field of what's actually happening or what has happened is very useful information, but it's still not forecasting. I call it nowcasting.
Okay.
But there is no way of gathering that information right now. And I'm trying to solve that problem, right? Because think of like people in general, we're a nosy species. Like I think of that app that came out recently called Neighborly, where like it's everyone's camera on their doorbell. And if something happens in the neighborhood, everyone gets notified. Like,
oh, wow.
It's that kind of mentality, but think of that mentality, but with weather. Now, imagine I told you right now, either one of you, right? Let's say right now it was a raging nor'easter. And I told you you can log into an application and you could click through all of the throughway cameras, all of the road cameras that are available, and individual observations from your peers across the entire region in real time, and see exactly what's on the ground by township, by road, by location, where there's a tree across the road, or exactly how much snow is at 3,900 feet in the Catskills as of 17 minutes ago. Tell me you wouldn't geek out over that information. Because I know I would have a hard time not just looking through it all day long, right? Because it doesn't currently exist. There is no place to source that information.
Like the only place you can do that right now is like the ski resorts.
That's it. Anyone, if there's a ski resort with a measuring pole and a snow camera, great. But the rest of the Catskills are a giant black hole. But at any given day, at any given time, there's people like you, me, and Tad up there seeing it. And what do they have for a resource? That Facebook page for Catskill trail conditions. That's great if you're into all the other stuff that happens on there, or if you're a Facebook user, which not everybody is. But again, it's limited. It's limited to whoever feels like posting. Not everyone wants to be on social media being put on blast. So the idea here is it would create a database. So imagine you could go to a zoomed in Google map. You could click any 3,500 foot mountain in the Catskills, and it would instantly come up with the most recently archived observation. And it would say, stash 196 hours ago, 14-inch snowpack, trail cut to summit. That's good information for you because you could say in your mind, okay, well, the weather really hasn't changed much. That's probably how much snow is still up there, right? My idea is the information gatherers, the bees, they're already out there. They just don't have any way of telling one unique source as to what they're seeing. And I think that could be extremely valuable in the Catskills. I know it's information I would have loved to have. That's something that we're currently working on. And it's been really cool to watch it. Like the few times we've tested it during a storm, watching the pin drops start to erupt from west to east across the Hudson Valley as people start posting their observations. It's like having more accurate radar, because what's more accurate than somebody telling you it's happening?
Yeah. Now, I participated in that actually, Alex. I remember one time, I think it was last year, we had like a cold front coming through, and I reported from Oneonta that we had snow starting instead of rain. And I think you guys shared that. It was just like, we're seeing snow in Oneonta, and it was really cool. I was like, oh shit. And then it happened. Everybody was like, oh my God, I'm seeing snow now. I'm seeing snow. It was really cool to, once again, to be kind of like the more Western person of Hive Storm is to be really neat. And I do it whenever I can. I have fun doing that. It's just simple 1, 2, 3 process.
We're working on switching it to an app because people will be more apt to use it. It's easier to use on an app than it is. People don't want to log into a website, but in order to build a good app, you have to have the website to support it. So right now there's a website, but eventually you'll just have an app, and all you'll have to do is click post observation. If you want to take a picture, you can take a picture. But to your point, when you live in an area where most of your weather is coming west to east, having users 45 minutes to an hour to the west telling you what's happening, that gives everyone in the Hudson Valley a near 2-hour heads up as to what to expect in live real time.
Yeah. So, but Alex, isn't there already like these web-enabled home weather stations that folks have?
So if you have a personal weather station, you can attach it to a network. Not everybody does. Weather Underground has a network where you can attach them. But
you suggest that?
My weather stations are connected to the network, but the problem is they're sparse. Like there's only a few online at any given time in Ulster County. Yeah. And what you'll also find as you click through them is they're only as good as the person who installed them and where they installed them.
Yeah.
So you'll log in there sometimes and you'll see ones that are just giving erroneous information. You don't know if they were hung in the right location. But we want to incorporate personal weather stations into that same data stream, because in a world full of data, you can't shy away from every information source you can get.
Correct.
Are you familiar with the weather station on Little Slide Mountain?
The Winniesuk one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've clicked through that one.
So I find it pretty interesting. I've never tried to log in to access its data, but I think it has some interesting equipment up there. And to what extent is any of these local weather stations useful to you in rendering your forecasts of weather to occur in the Catskills?
If they were more concentrated, more reliable, they're great. Are there some that I check on because I know they're good information? Sure. As a forecaster, there's nothing more valuable than ground information, which is why I rolled out HiveStorm. Knowing exactly what's happening on the ground is critical. Like I said, I've kind of coined the word nowcasting, because the forecasting doesn't end just because the storm arrived. You have to continue to evolve your forecast based on how it's starting to come together. And we often see things changing as they happen. And getting people to tell you in real time that things are happening is extremely valuable. And interestingly enough, a lot of people don't realize this, but if you ever really want to go down a rabbit hole, one of the longest running, most consistent, and most unique climate capturing sites in the entire country is in Minnewaska.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Mohonk Mountain House, the Smiley family.
The Smiley family has been collecting weather the same time of day, in the same location, in the same format for over 100 years.
Yeah. Wow.
There are very few data sites in the entire world that exist. And to take it a step further, it is the only weather site in the entire country that not only has been collecting from the same spot, same fashion, same location, same time of day, multiple times a day, but they overlap their data with the behavior of fauna, the acid levels and temperature and first freeze dates of the lake. And I was invited to their station to go through some of their records, and it's fascinating to be able to see in real time first snows starting later, last snows falling later, fauna leaving later, lakes freezing later, and acid levels rising over the course of nearly 125 years. And try to ignore the trend is nearly impossible, because everything's impacted by it. The behavior of the animals. I mean, they have fauna behavior, everything. And when you start extrapolating and overlapping those data points, it's very amazing to look at it, because it's consistent. It's been taken and been gathered the same way the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
A cool thing to visit. Cool thing to take a gander at if you ever get a chance.
So, the Minnewaska thing. Okay, let me. I will put that on there. I also have Hivestorm on the list as well. So just to have people, it's on the show notes that you can click into. I very highly suggest Hivestorm. Once again, we could all, I know a lot, there's people that live up in Syracuse, down in New York City, Binghamton, stuff like that. Once you get your observation and you put it in the Hivestorm, we can all benefit from this. And, Alex and his team can put together, what's going to happen in the Catskills for the next couple days, the next day or so. That could help us out when we're getting ready to go out to the trails. Because, with New York State, we don't know what the fuck's going to happen the next day. Something might change in a matter of hours. And New York State is probably one of the most unpredictable states that we have with weather forecasting.
Great.
Yeah, tornado up in Syracuse. And then once again, there's sunny skies down in the Hudson Valley. Or, Adirondacks get 18 inches of snow, but the Catskills have, just floods and stuff. It's absolutely insane. So, I thank you again for doing your forecasting, because it's just, I gotta admit, it's got to be a tough job. You guys come together as one and make your best predictions possible, and who knows what's going to happen, because New York State is one big clusterfuck.
Yeah. Listen, it's called job security. If it was a normal area, it wouldn't be so much fun.
Yeah, like the Midwest, like, oh, we're going to get tornadoes for the next 6 months. We're cool.
Imagine trying to have Florida Valley weather.
Right, sunshine and humidity, and then maybe a hurricane here and there.
So, Alex, my last question is the question that all of our listeners have been wanting us to ask since the beginning of this episode, and that is this going to be a particularly snowy winter? Is it going to be a moderate winter with, the ebb and flow back and forth between freeze, thaw, rain, snow? Or is this the most snow that we're going to get, and winter's going to fade away before it starts? So what's your overall Farmer's Almanac version, if you will, of the winter forecast for 2025, 2026?
I think it's important for us to pour out a little beer for the Farmer's Almanac.
Yeah, because they're done.
This is their last season. So
yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You put them out of business. Shame.
I know, right?
So good shout out to the Farmer's Almanac. I used to love getting that as a kid, and really hoping that I would flip all the pages and only go to the section where it said blizzard and be like, "Oh, we're gonna get a blizzard." They rarely happen, but this winter, I tell you what. So I've been on the above average winter train since about midsummer. I'm going to stick with that. There's a lot. Now, listen, winter forecasting and long range forecasting as a whole is a very fickle business. There are things that we look at. There's lots of different things we look at. We look at the Arctic oscillation. We look at PDO, like where are the troughs and ridges in the West, in the Pacific? Because what's important to know, and this is a good rule of thumb that always confuses people. You want it to be warm in Alaska. That's the key, right? If you're seeing news reports of abnormally warm temperatures in Alaska, then we're going to have a great winter, right? Our winter is very much driven by what's going on upstream from us. And the ridge and trough patterns across the lower 48 are very much driven by things like ice coverage in the Arctic, southeast ridge off the coast of Florida, negative North Atlantic oscillation. You got to think, at the end of the day, whatever we can do to get the jet stream to buckle and to slow down. What we've been seeing the last few winters, and it literally hurts my heart to say these words out loud, but the southeast ridge has been a dagger to our winters. And basically what the southeast ridge is it's an area of high pressure that's been persistently occurring off the coast of Florida. And the flow around a high pressure is clockwise. So if you have a high pressure parked just off of Florida with a clockwise rotation, it means you have warm air constantly being pumped up the East Coast. This has caused the jet stream to flatten out because it's got warm air pushing against it. And it's left us on this battleground of cold air in winter trying to establish itself and a southeast ridge pushing against it. And that has created the land of wintry mixes. Oh, it's snowing. Oh, now it's sleeting. Oh, now it's raining. Oh, it snowed it's raining again. Oh, it snowed. Oh, we're finally getting some, warm spell. We've been in this battleground, right? What we've seen so far this year, December, is you haven't heard about 12 to 15 foot snowstorms in the Sierra Nevada, have you?
Not yet. No.
They have been under the influence of a ridge all winter. And if you have a ridge on the West Coast, you have a trough in the East Coast. Everything needs to balance itself out. So when it's warm in Alaska, it's because all the cold air is dumping into the East Coast. And we are now in one of our coldest Decembers on record in over 10 years. And we have 3 measurable, plowable snowstorms pre-Christmas. And the southeast ridge has been pushed back into oblivion, which has caused the storm track to be more of a cold and snow producer than we're typically used to. There is no reason to expect that pattern to break down. It looks to persist into January. Likely we see a midwinter warm up that's very typical of the Northeast. Eventually the pattern will have to recharge and relax. It's totally normal. But all signs point to a very active East Coast storm track. A lot of storms up the coast, a lot of cold air pouring down from Canada. The polar vortex has been extremely disrupted multiple times this year. And when the polar vortex is disrupted, basically what that means is the polar vortex wants to live in the Arctic Circle. What happens is when warm air gets over the Arctic Circle, the cold air doesn't just disappear, it gets displaced. Polar vortex disruption. And when it gets displaced, it starts to shift into the lower latitudes. And we start to get those breakouts of epically cold air. So it's almost as weird as it sounds. You want warmth in the Arctic. You want a ridge on the West Coast to drive a nice, blocky, cold, troughy pattern on the East Coast, which is what we've seen so far in December. It's very easy for us to forget. I would say out of the last 7 winters, at least 5 of them, we didn't see our first snow until after Christmas.
Yeah.
The fact that we're on our 3rd plowable storm in some areas pre-Christmas, and we might not be done. I think that the pattern has been hinting, and the viewers can quote me. This is somewhat long-range forecasting. For about 2 weeks now, the weather models and the atmosphere has wanted to do this brief warm-up at the end of the week, which is now coming to fruition. It wants to recharge the cold air, and it wants to spin up some type of snow event on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. That is very much on the table this year.
Wow.
I would keep a close eye on the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day period for some snow magic across the area. So
talk about a stocking stuffer. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to be like, screw you. I didn't need any presents. I'm just going to go out snowshoeing.
Yeah.
I expect a message. If we get closer to Christmas and you start seeing snow in the forecast, I want you to be like, man, that guy is not playing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. Unbelievable.
Woo!
Like this stuff, like, I don't know why you're not on doing more videos of like this stuff, because it brings all of it to like a great perspective that you can understand from a person like me who is not like sophisticated in the science aspect of meteorology, or like what you said, like of topography with clashes with condensation and stuff like that. This all brings it into sense of why we have microclimates in this area and why yours is breaking into zones of the Hudson Valley, the Catskill. It all makes perfect sense now. Like this breaks it down. And I do not. Let's stop it right now, because I want more of this. I want to have you on again in 60 more episodes and stuff like that.
Let's get Alex back in the spring so he can tell us, what our summer is going to be like, and and then we can either call him out or praise him based upon what he told us tonight is either going to be a great Catskill winter, or if it turns out to be a mediocre winter.
I will never call him out.
Yeah, we're going to tell him he can't wear the Santa cap again.
Not at all.
So, yeah,
listen, people don't realize it's average snowfall for the Hudson Valley, particularly around Kingston, is shockingly somewhere between 43 and 50 inches. That's an average winter. Average.
What do we have right now?
13.
Oh, wow.
Right? So 13 pre-Christmas, when 43 is average, is very much on your way to an above average winter.
Correct.
The bottom would really have to fall out the rest of the season for it not to turn out to at least at a bare minimum be an average winter. And what we typically find is average to above average winters in our area are usually made up by single storms.
Yeah.
You get one giant nor'easter, and for us, they typically come in March, which once you understand the atmosphere, you understand why the biggest storms happen in March. 4 of this region's largest storms have occurred on March 13th. So that's your magic period there, where the warmth of emerging spring clashes with the final throes of winter, and you can get some pretty horrific storms. If you want something to gleam over, just spend a little bit of time reading about the blizzard of 1888. That is, if you're looking for the benchmark, if we have snow lovers who listen to your podcast, or if you two are prolific snow lovers, you always want to root for 1888. The blizzard of 1888, otherwise dubbed the Great White Hurricane, blew drifts up to 56 feet high in parts of New York State.
Nice.
And people walking out of their houses from their second-story windows. It's reported that the temperature dropped so quickly in New York City that birds were falling from the sky.
Wow.
It's the benchmark for Northeast blizzards. And there hasn't been one like it since. It even makes the blizzard of 1992 and the perfect storm pale in comparison to what's really possible, and technically what we're overdue for, because history always has a way of repeating itself. But that would be one for the memory books.
Correct. And I can't say I'm looking forward to it, but I'm looking forward to it. I don't want any damage to my house, but that would be something else. I always love those extreme events of wind, snow. It's crazy. So, Alex, wow, it's been amazing, knowledgeable time with you on the podcast once again. I mean, we're almost hitting. I'm guessing it's like 3 hours now. It's insane, like how much just time that flies by. But when you're pouring some amazing information out that we can all like just act like gather in and just be like, wow, this is incredible. So the last question we have on the night, of course, is post-hike brews and bites. What is your favorite place that you want to recommend in the Catskills that you'll go out for something to eat or drink besides Westkill?
Man, this is a random one. This may or may not come as a surprise, but my go-to, I would say I may have in more than half of my high peaks stopped at this location at the end of every one, would be Pancho Villa's in Tannersville for a bowl of chili and a shrimp stuffed jalapeno.
Good stuff. Pancho Villa's.
Wow.
It's good.
If you've never had their chili and specifically shrimp stuffed jalapenos after a hike on a cold day, that chili hits different.
Nice.
I expect both of you to at least give either one or both of those appetizers a shot. That's the only two things we would ever get. Give me a bowl of chili. Give me the shrimp stuffed jalapenos from Pancho Villa's after a cold day hiking in the Catskills. Any day, that was my go-to. I can't say there's any other one place I stopped at more often than that post-hike.
Nice. I'll admit I've been there after my 100th episode. I went there for dinner and it was fantastic. Amazing burrito. So fantastic. Good suggestion.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Checking it out. Looking at the menu right now.
It's right across from Camp Catskill. Well, somewhat. It's a little adjacent.
Yeah. If Alex's winter forecast didn't get me salivating, the menu here is. Yeah.
Shrimp stuffed jalapenos are like, and I've had them other places because I was like, oh, maybe I just really like shrimp stuffed jalapenos, but I've never ever since had anyone like they make it. It's just phenomenal. And their chili, same thing. It's great.
Nice.
Great stuff.
Nice. Well, excellent. It's in the show notes. Once again, Alex, thank you so much for joining us, taking your time out to explain microclimates, Hudson Valley weather, stuff like that. Everything's going to be in the show notes. So anybody, once again, check out Hive Storm. It's really cool. We could all benefit from that and stuff like that. Once again, check out Hudson Valley Weather. Alex has founded this place. It is awesome. It helps out the Catskills, helps out the Hudson Valley area. Check it out, like it, share it, stuff like that. And Alex, once again, I thank you for taking your time out and join us on the show because I had a fantastic time learning about microclimates, learning about Hudson Valley Catskill weather. I do not see this as your last time being on the show. Please, no.
No, listen, I listen. Anytime I can get anyone, you have to understand, being a weather geek as a kid wasn't easy. There weren't many friends who wanted me to talk to them about the incoming nor'easter. So as an adult, being able to talk about the weather and having people want to listen, I can go all day, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about something you're passionate about. It's easy to talk about. So same thing with hiking. And I agree. I think what better start to the next podcast than some wild footage of both of us purposely hiking a mountain during extreme weather. So let's make that happen as our entry.
Yeah.
And then we can do a post-storm, post-hike conversation about it.
At the Mexican place in Tannersville.
Yep.
Manchos Villas.
Over some Dos Equis.
Over a shrimp stuffed jalapeno.
I agree. Well, at least this time I can tell my wife, like, well, with this storm coming, I got Alex and Tad joining me on this snowshoe. So she'll be like, all right, I guess. Like, cool. So, Alex, thanks for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I had a fucking fantastic time. You're the best.
Thanks, Alex.
I appreciate both of you. I appreciate you having me on. I expect feedback on the Christmas period, the overall winter period. If either one of you have a shrimp stuffed jalapeno, and I expect a hike invite. Cheers.
Yes,
will do.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas, guys.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to all.
Yeah.
And to all a happy hike.
And a happy hike. Good night, guys.
Hey, everyone. I just want to thank you for listening to the show. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe and throw down a smooth review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any podcast platform that you use. You can also check daily updates of the podcast, hikes, hiking news, and local news on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the official website of the show. Remember this, you gotta just keep on living in the Catskills, man. Livin.
Wicked, 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 wicked.